Welcome to today's video where I'm going to be trying out the Isamaya Industrial 2.0 palette. I have tried the previous Industrial palette and I did enjoy it, though I definitely had a couple of thoughts on that one, especially because these palettes are expensive, though I do kind of understand why. Especially this 2.0 palette, it is just full of beautiful textures, shimmery shadows, sparkly shadows, and shifty shadows. Honestly, it took my breath away when I opened it, and I almost didn't want to touch some of the shadows because they looked absolutely exquisite untouched. Now, there are some slightly chunkier formulas, some slightly flakier formulas, some very, very silky smooth, some of the silkiest, smoothest shimmer shadows I've ever touched. There is one kind of cream to matte. It's like a blackened brown, and then there are a couple of satin shades as well. And I really feel like this is such an artistry kind of palette. You're meant to really just layer these and have fun with these. And I am just glad that there aren't any really duplicate shades in this one, because the first one, my biggest criticism was that there was essentially two of the same cream to matte kind of shadows. One of them had a slight blue sheen to it, I think, and it was extremely hard to translate that. And I just felt like it made the palette not worth it. Now, I have already used this palette off camera, and I have to say that I definitely prefer this one to the first version. But let's get right into the two looks, and I'll give you some of my thoughts at the end of the video. I do want to mention that this is a bit hard to open, especially if you have longer nails. Like, this is a struggle to open. I almost want to just keep it a little bit cracked open just so I don't have to deal with it. The shadows have names on the back. However, I'm not really sure which one corresponds with which, so I'm just going to be pointing to the shadows. I am going to be only using this palette for both of the looks. I'm not going to be adding any mattes. And I'm priming with the KVD Shake Primer. I'm just trying to kind of get a little bit more use out of it. It's not necessarily that it's like my favorite eyeshadow primer or anything like that, because I don't really have one, to be honest. It's just kind of whatever I have when it comes to filming specifically. I pulled out a couple of lid shader brushes I'm probably going to be using. One of them is the Sonia G Flat Definer because it is smaller. The Refer 28, of course, staple, and Refer 21 also a staple, slightly larger, and then the E29 from ColourPop. I believe this came in a set, also slightly smaller, but even smaller and flatter than the Sonia G. So just a couple of different sizes. And then I also do have this mini MAC Fix Plus that's just filled with water. There's no Fix Plus. I don't like using Fix Plus because it's just glycerin. And honestly, I'm probably going to end up using my finger a little bit too. So let's see. I think actually first I'm going to take a totally different brush. This is a Hakuhodo brush that has, unfortunately, the name rubbed off because I've had it for a while. But I'm first going to be going into this cream to powder, essentially, kind of shadow. And I'm going to be creating an eyeshadow wing with that. I do think that this shadow is buildable because I have used it previously and I had to build it up quite a bit, so I think it really depends on the type of eyeshadow primer you're using underneath it. I'm actually experiencing a little bit of fallout, which I'm a little bit surprised, not gonna lie. So I'm just gonna wing this out, and I'm kind of just gonna feather this outer portion out a bit. That is going up on an angle, And then I'm going to also connect it just a tiny bit underneath my lower lash line. So just really keeping it nice and close to my lash line up here. I'm going to dip into this shadow up here. Super silky smooth, but it has a little bit of texture to it. And oh my gosh, look at the way that it picked up. A little chunky. So I did miss the brush with just some water. I'm going to pop that kind of a little bit over the liner and onto the outer edge here. And I'm going to bring it up into my crease. And here's on the outer corner. And then on the inner portion, I'm going to go in with this shade, which is essentially, it looks kind of like a typical brownish, greenish duochrome shade. And this one picked up much smoother. And I'm just going to mist my brush again, just to make sure that I try to avoid a little bit of fallout. And I'm just going to pop that right above that other shadow. And again, I'm going to put it a little bit onto the crease. And then for the inner corner, going in with this shadow. Now, this shadow is definitely more topper-like and a little bit on the, not like flaky side. I mean, kind of flaky. It's more just like fractally. It reminds me of the Astral formula from Pat McGrath. And it's going to go right in here. Oh, wow. Wow, that looks so pretty. And I'm just going to create like this highlight here, and I'm going to bring it all the way up and even just above right here. I've definitely experiencing some fallout, so I would recommend you definitely do your eye look before anything else. Let's see if I can just kind of flick this off. Not very easily, unfortunately. I might need to bring in my sponge and just kind of see if I can get these things off. Taking this green satin shadow, and I'm going to pop it right underneath the lower lash line. And I'm definitely going to mist it just to try to get it to be most opaque down here. It definitely still has like a sheen to it, but it's not just like sparkly like some of the other shadows. And then I'm going to bring that sparkly shadow I just used up here onto the inner corner because I forgot to cover that area. And here's the first finished look. For the second look, I'm just going to be layering a bunch of different shadows together. I did notice some fun things happening when I like layered this and this, or this and this, or the green and this. Also, like there's just a lot of different mixtures you can create. So I'm going in with this pinky shade, and I'm going to pop that onto the inner lid. Then I'm going to take the shade right next to it. This one's definitely more like a duochrome, so you can see they have a little bit of a sheen to it. And then on the outer corner, I'm taking the green shimmer shadow. And that alone is really pretty and doesn't accentuate any skin texture. It's really nice. It just kind of blends into my skin, so it doesn't look like it's like an extra layer of anything. And I'm going to take this shadow right here. This shadow is so silky smooth, I can't even believe it. And actually, where do I want to put it? I'm just going to pop it over here. We're just going to layer it over here and bring it up into the crease. It has a little bit of a brownish base, so it's going to essentially give us a little bit of an effect of a brown shadow being in my crease. So you can see right now it's kind of happening there. I'm going to take this shade right here on my pinky, and I'm just going to put that right underneath my brow, just really rub it into my skin there. That little pop of color, and I'm blending it outwards. And then picking up the shadow here, also a little bit flaky, so shiny and so metallic. I am going to spray this one just because I don't want really too much. I'm just gonna pop that onto the outer corner, kind of deepen it up a little bit, but not much because it does sheer out actually, and I'm also layering it, so I'm actually gonna go in with a little bit more. This is just going to be a really fun kind of look with just a lot happening. And then I'm going to also bring that underneath my lower lash line. I love me some shimmers. Underneath my lower lash line, on the outer corner, just everywhere. Don't let anyone tell you where you can and can't wear shimmer shadows, because they are beautiful wherever you want to place them on your lid. And then going in with that duochrome kind of periwinkle shade underneath my lower lash line. Definitely a little bit of fallout. And I'm going to take this gold as well. Let's just find a place for it. I think I'm going to put it right here, the inner portion, and kind of bring it up a little bit. Just like a thin line, kind of outlining the rest of the shimmers. And I'm also going to take this green shade I put here. I'm just going to go over it with the brush, kind of on the side, so it's kind of blending at the same time. And I'm going to actually go in back with this purple here. I want to bring it back a little bit. And I mean, look at this. It looks like my eyelid is wet. Love this. It looks so pretty, so dimensional. And I think one major thing to note is the amount of different layers of these has not accentuated any skin texture on my lid. It just melts into the skin, which is something else I noticed with the first palette, is the formula is just absolutely divine and meant to be layered so that it does not accentuate skin texture. And I think that makes the other palette as well as this palette. So I think you can already see the packaging gets dirty so very fast because of the material, not only on the front but also on the back, which I'm not the biggest fan of. It is hard to open, even just right now it's closed and I'm having a hard time trying to open it. So those are kind of the main real cons, but of course it's getting really just like down to the nitty gritty. As for the shadows themselves, I pretty much knew I would enjoy this palette the moment I opened it because I could see the different textures in here, and I just know I am extremely a textural person when it comes to shadows. I want my sparkle. I was a little bit, you know, off-put maybe by the more satin shadows in here. That being said, they're really nice and you can really layer them and have fun with them. So I will show you what I'm talking about in a second, but I do want to first talk about this shadow, which is kind of the only non-shimmery shadow. It has a little bit of a sheen to it. This it does not wear well for me because it is a little bit on the creamy side and I do have hooded oily lids, so I have encountered a bit of fading with this shade. So I would probably not be really reliant on this if you have hooded oily lids and you have issues, but I do think you can have lots of fun layering some of the shadows. So let me actually show you kind of how transformative these are, and of course like you could do this with any shimmer shadows. It doesn't have to be this palette, but I feel like this palette really leans for it to happen. So for example, taking this shade right here, you can see how it's not very shimmery, and then taking the shadow in the top section and just mixing it together. So it adds more shine and also it lightens it up. And let me just add another layer of that. So it just really transformed it. You got like a really nice silvery but still kind of shifty shadow going on. Next I'm going to do this green. So this is it on its own, and I'm going to mix this shadow in with it. I think maybe I put a little bit too much, so let me go back in with this one. And you can just see like it kind of subdued the shine a little bit, but it also transformed the color. And then last one, I'm going to take this pink and then layer over the very outermost super silky smooth beautiful duochrome shadow. And again, just mixing them together, and look at that, it just gave it like this pinkiness to it. And the finish, I mean the finish is stunning. Like if I could just have a palette full of this formula right here, I would be an extremely happy camper, because this, I cannot describe to you. I felt some really, really silky shadows, but this shadow is just so ultra smooth. So based on my preferences and how I like to do shadow, I feel like this palette, maybe not worth $115, maybe worth maybe $90. I think for it to be worth $115, the full price, I would have switched out maybe the cream to powder shadow as well as the shadow that's up here in the corner. But again, I would just prefer some more of the kind of special formulas like this one and of course the one I just talked about down here. But I am glad I picked it up. So let me know in the comments below if you got this palette and what you think of it, especially if you're an indie makeup lover. I would love to know your thoughts on a more mainstream palette, even though it is indie, but it's not like niche indie, if you know what I mean. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next time.